Call this meeting to order. Please join me for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, welcome everyone. This is one of the more crowded audiences we've had post-COVID. So it's good to have folks here in audience. We always start off with the review of tonight's agenda. We'll be calling for the roll, then I'll be looking for any possible changes to tonight's agenda. Under public comment, you said we had
no comments.
no comments. We will then move forward to our consent agenda. Under old business, we will be continuing a public hearing. There will be opportunity for public comment if you wish to comment during that hearing on that issue there at Meadows Subdivision appeal. Then under new business, we'll also be having a public hearing for approval of findings for the CMGC procurement method. If you'd like to testify for that, there will be an opportunity during that time for that issue. Otherwise, we'll then be going to our owner's representative wastewater program support contract amendment number 2, as well as an audit of a corrective plan of action. Then we'll get a report from our city manager, move to committee and council reports, and look to adjourn for the evening. With that, Jeff, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Councilor Pietzold. Here. Councilor Smallwood. Here. Councilor Sheldon. Here. Councilor Walker.
Here.
Councilor Exner.
Here.
Councilor Hokinson.
Here.
Here. All right. Thank you for that. With that, is there any proposed changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, and that there is no public comment offered for this evening, we'll move forward to the consent agenda. Unless there's discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we accept the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
A second.
A motion from Councilor Sheldon, a second from Councilor Pietzold. All those in favor signify by saying aye or give me a thumbs up, Don. Aye. Opposed, nays, or a thumbs down? Motion carries. Moving on to old business. I will reopen our Deer Meadows appeal application. A couple of notes on speaker time limits. Up to 20 minutes will be offered for the appellate's presentation. Up to 3 minutes for each member of the public who would like to testify. Then there will be up to 10 minutes for the applicant's rebuttal. We have reopened public hearing state land use file 21061 AP at 7:03 p.m. I will call for any abstentions from the hearing body. Are there any conflicts of interest? I'm now going to pull the hearing body for any ex parte contacts.
You know, Mayor, I was on the planning commission when this first came up. Jeremy, I'm looking at you.
Oh, I guess I was on it too.
Gotta be 10 years ago.
Oh,
It's quite a while.
I was on it. Before it was, I was on the city council, so that goes
So you
back
want
to
to- I
17.
was on planning commission, so
I think it would really only pertain to this
yeah.
application though, for that.
if that's true, then none.
So it was discussed at the Parks Board meeting last week, but just from the standpoint of fee and lieu or parks areas. So other than that, nothing.
All right.
I've been to the site. I run by the site every day.
All right. All right. With that, I will now call for any challenges to members of the hearing body. To bring a challenge, if you're joining us in person this evening, just please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. If you're participating online, please click the raised hand button and wait to be recognized. If you're participating via telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand and wait to be recognized. I will now wait for any possible challenges. All right, seeing none, I will move forward to the staff report. Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see here, so I just hit the top button on this.
You need to share your screen before you do.
Hey, Mayor, can I, going back to the ex parte contact, I had some discussion or involvement back when this was proposed for annexation.
Okay.
Before I was a city councilor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Annexation, that's got to be 20 years.
Huh?
That's a long time ago.
Was it? Okay.
I'm just not used to
Oh, you're. in
No,
the-
it wasn't.
so you're in the P effort.
I saw this on planning 18 years ago.
Just to zoom in a little.
Was it 18 years ago?
I was like
Yeah.
several years ago.
I don't think I'm that old.
It was, oh, excuse me, it was the change of comp zoning. That's what it was.
Yeah.
The comp plan amendment. That's what it was. Excuse me.
Noted. Thank you.
Okay, it's been around a long time.
Okay.
Sorry.
We're ready when you are.
Okay. So this is a appeal of a previous file number, and the appeal file number is 21-061. It's for Meadows subdivision. Jump kind of right into where it's located. It's located to the south of Highway 26, to the east of Lang and Sand, and the eastern terminus of Demarco Road, and kind of west or southwest of where the west intersection of this loop drive and Highway 26 is. So kind of right across the street from the Sandy Vista Apartments. And it's the crosshatch red area on this map. The original request was for a type 2 subdivision based on section 17-1220 from Title 17 of the Sandy Municipal Code. And because of previous interest in numerous subdivisions at the site, I decided to elevate it to a planning commission hearing. At that planning commission hearing, the planning commission denied the subdivision request, and that's why the appeal is before you tonight. We've had some public comments so far. A lot of them are actually pretty similar to the concerns that staff also still has about this application. Demarco Road not being proposed to intersect with Highway 26, which has been in the TSP for decades at this point. Deer Point Park not being proposed to be expanded, which has been a goal of the city and also in the previous Parks Master Plan, as it wanted a larger park at this location. There were a few concerns that the public raised that staff is not as concerned about, and only because I'll go through both of these. So more housing will increase congestion and exacerbate parking issues. While this might be true, the applicant did do a traffic study, and I don't think that would be the case. However, I think you could make the case for this potentially being a concern without Demarco Road going through and connecting with the highway. And then the last one, although I understand the concerns that people in town have about multifamily housing, because of the zoning at this particular site, it is an allowed outright permitted use, at least on a portion of the site. So the proposal currently is a 30 lot subdivision. When you were about to hear this in February, it was a 32 lot subdivision. With the revisions, there's 28 lots of low density residential, one small lot, less than a quarter acre actually, a medium density, and then one large lot, almost 7.5 acres, that is split between medium density residential and village commercial. And so on the village commercial and the medium density residential, there would be allowances for multifamily housing. So I think that's some of the concern that you heard from the public comments as I expressed on the previous slide. So the 28 lots vary in size from 5,500 square feet to a little over 13,000. They would be single family homes and or duplexes with the passing of House Bill 2001. On the R2 zone land, it would be somewhere between 38 and 66 dwelling units based on our density standards. And the C3 zone is very hard to predict. It would most likely be a mix of commercial and residential development. So you'd probably see a mixture of some commercial there and then also most likely apartment units. So this is the revised plat map. It's kind of small on that screen. This is the revision since you saw this in February. The staff report, I tried to do the best I could, so hopefully I didn't miss anything. There's a lot to look through. But based on their revisions and this revised plat map, the staff report had a lot of edits, kind of looked like track changes. So everything in red was new additions or modifications that I wrote in there, and everything with blue cross through or strike through were things that I removed based on the update. So as you can see on this map, and I'll go into it further on some other slides, but the revisions mainly remove 2 lots from the R1 land. And instead of having those 2 lots, they're proposing public parkland now. And the public parkland on here is shown in green. This was discussed last Wednesday night at the Parks and Trails Advisory Board, and they advised against accepting the parkland as proposed. And they submitted, Dawn, the chair, submitted a comment for the record that should be included with the staff report. And they talked about it for a little bit, but ultimately they decided that they would recommend not approving this plan when the park is laid out. And just to be very clear, the Parks Board is not a quasi judicial land use board. So they can base their proposal on
Whatever
pretty
they
much
want.
anything they want to.
Yeah.
So they don't have to look at the subdivision criteria. They don't have to look at the code and determine if it's clear and objective. So there was some confusion about that at the meeting, but they don't have to look at any of that stuff. They're not a hearing body. So take it or leave it, but that's the recommendation at this point. Another thing that the applicant's attorney pointed out in some of the correspondence and letters is that because the city is moving forward with edits to chapter 1732 and 1786, which is the park code standards, that we're somehow conceding something, or that we're admitting that the code's not clear and objective, or that things are not properly incorporated. I would say that none of that is true. I've not been on the record saying any of that. We have, like I told the Parks Board last Wednesday night, we have had concerns about those 2 code chapters, and all we're doing is revising them. So the applicant's attorney might think that we're conceding something, or might think that it's implying something, but I'm not. So I just want to let you know. So the subdivision approval criteria, based on, what is that, 7 findings in the staff report, we still find that the subdivision does not meet 6 of the 7 approval criteria. We do believe it meets the phasing criteria since there's no phasing proposed. And this is in Sandy Municipal Code, section 17160E. A few of the big issues that are still, the applicant, I will say, did a really good job of addressing a lot of the smaller concerns that staff and the planning commission have raised. And if you go through the recommendation section at the end of the staff report, you can see they did accomplish or meet a lot of the smaller concerns that we did have. There's still a few big concerns that are laying out there, and probably going to be the majority of the conversation tonight. In accordance with the existing TSP that we have adopted, Demarco Road is shown as a minor arterial that's connecting to the highway. As you'll see on this plan, they're still not showing Demarco Road connecting to the highway. And I do want to point out one other thing while I'm sitting on this subject, is that the applicant's previous attorney and the current attorney have both claimed that the code exempts connections in one of the code sections, but I think that code section is very clear and objective that it's talking about local street connections, which they would be correct in that, ODOT doesn't want a whole bunch of local streets connecting out to the state highway system. But as you'll see in the record, ODOT supports this connection. It's in the TSP. They've said that they would grant access. So, I hope our attorneys on the line speak to this more, but I think their attorney and their previous attorney that they had working on this application are kind of overlooking some of the finer points in that specific section that is talking about local streets. So I'll leave it at that for now. One of the other big issues, as talked about at the Parks Board, is no park expansion. Well, I'll take that back. They are proposing about 5,000 square feet of park expansion. But the majority of what the city would like to see long-term from the 1997 Parks Master Plan is not being addressed as far as park expansion. They are doing some park dedication, roughly a little bit over an acre. And so they are proposing some parkland. So I think it's a better proposal than what you would have seen in February, in that it is proposing parkland, but I don't think it's in the desired location for the master plan or the Parks Board. And then the third big one is the frontage improvements. So I'll leave this to our city attorney to address, but the arguments because they're not connecting Demarco Road to the highway, they don't have to do any of the frontage improvements. At some point in the future, we will need frontage improvements on the highway. They do more than just provide access for pedestrians walking along the highway. They're a major traffic calming measure. If you look at how state highways are slowed down, when you actually put visual cues in, that actually slows down traffic. So there's multiple reasons we'd want the frontage improvements, but the applicant is not proposing them at this point.
So what's all included in a frontage improvement?
It would be curb, a planter strip, potentially street trees based on if ODOT would allow it, sidewalk, lighting, stormwater. So a lot of expense that the city would have to take on in the future.
All along the way there on Highway 26.
The whole frontage along Highway 26. That is correct. So based on the legal arguments from the applicant, it really hasn't changed much since planning commission. It's been kind of the running theme from this particular attorney's office, unfair and objective, and not properly incorporating different master planning objectives into the development code. So I'll let Chris Green speak to that if you have questions, but I just wanted to hit upon that's the main argument they're making, almost the reasons why they don't have to meet the development code. And like I said, we're, at least myself, I'm not conceding anything. I don't agree with some of the legal arguments. I believe the TSP is properly incorporated into the subdivision criteria. If a court or LUBA or something like that would decide otherwise, that's fine, but I think it is incorporated into the subdivision criteria. And we've been using it as such for the past, 25, 30 years in Sandy. And we do believe the parkland dedication requirements are clear and objective, and therefore land dedication can be required. And I'll leave it at that for now. And just a few other things to keep in mind that the attorney's office, the applicant's attorney's office put together a pretty lengthy letter that they submitted, I think, on Friday. And I just want to remind everybody knows this, but I just want to remind it for the public too, is that the reason why applicants and developers hire attorneys typically is to limit construction costs and argue on their behalf. So of course, they're going to make every point they possibly can. It's kind of like the kitchen sink approach. And in past discussions, in past testimony, in a past application, the applicant agreed that Demarco Road was needed for the TSP and development code. Now they're saying that it's not. I'll leave that at that. So as I already said, the first points, the Parks and Trails Advisory Board unanimously recommended denial of the proposed parkland dedication. Planning Commission and staff recommend City Council deny Deer Meadows based on the findings of fact as identified in findings 19 through 24, and primarily related to those three big items that I brought up, which is the connection to Demarco Road, the frontage improvements along the highway, and the parkland.
So just a question before we move on. So when we postponed that last hearing, it was to argue over where the park land dedication would go.
Let me think of a good way.
Or I
to
guess
address
the improvements.
that. I
was
think,
based on that.
yeah, that's a good question. So I think, they're still not proposing Demarco Road or the highway improvements. They did propose a lot of utility line extensions that the code was requiring. They also did propose parkland, albeit not in the location that we're looking for. And they did address a lot of the smaller issues as addressed in the recommendations.
That wasn't the agreement, though. I mean, this council is under the impression that we were getting some pretty big back and forth with staff, which is why we decided to go ahead and, postpone it. So I just want to start by saying I'm a little disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, they proposed what they felt like all they had to propose and meet legal muster, and they went with that. There wasn't a lot of back and forth. We did meet and we had some good discussions, but it wasn't like, oh, here's what we're gonna propose. The applicant was very honest that they still didn't know if staff would support it or not. So,
Okay.
I mean, they were very upfront with me, but no, it wasn't a lot of like, oh, why don't you try this or do that?
Yeah, we weren't all of a sudden connecting the bar.
No.
All right, cool.
So that's my presentation at this time. I don't know if our attorney wants to add anything at this time or wait, probably wait. I'll stop sharing.
Any questions before we move to applicants? All right, let's go to the applicant's presentation. Welcome. You'll have up to 20 minutes, and Jeff, our city recorder, will provide you a 2-minute warning. Thank you for coming. You're welcome.
Great. Good evening, Mayor Pulliam, members of the council. My name is Garrett Stevenson. I'm the applicant's attorney. My address is 1211 Southwest Fifth Avenue, Suite 1900, Portland, Oregon, 97204. Here tonight representing Roll Tide Properties Corp. As you can tell, there's been a lot of water under the bridge on this project, and I'm going to hit on the highlights. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce the group that we have here tonight. Dave Vandehey is our client representative. He's been working on this project both in the former iteration and proposal with this council, which this council denied, but also this one. Tracy Brown is our land use plan consultant. He's right behind me. I'm guessing some of you know Tracy. Mike Ard is our traffic engineer, also behind me. And tonight I've got Ray Moore with All County Surveyors in case there's questions about engineering. So Dave is going to give you guys kind of his thoughts as the applicant, because I think at this stage it's probably good to hear from the guy who owns the property, followed by Tracy and then Mike to talk a little bit about Demarco Road and some other issues. But before I hand the mic over, I'd like to just provide a couple remarks here. This is the second project, as some of you know, that Roll Tide has brought before you. And Dave's going to give you some background on that, because I think that will make it easier to understand why the project is arranged the way it is. But the key issue with the last project, Bull Run Terrace, which was denied, was that we wanted to bring forward a plan that we could create with some assurance that it would get approved. And that connects to the issue of clear and objective criteria, and also to the issue of what TSP standards and park standards are actually incorporated in the zoning code. The state, and with all due respect to your planning director, there's a very good reason why these issues have not come up until recently, because the statute on clear and objective criteria was amended in 2017 to extend the protections of clear and objective criteria to any development of housing. Before that, it was a much more niche issue. So this is something that we are seeing more and more of. And we wanted to produce a plan that would give the applicant an idea of what the standards actually are. Okay. And that is why it looks very different to what you might have seen in Bull Run Terrace. The goal here is not at all to thumb our nose at the city's criteria. The goal here is to figure out the criteria that we can understand and build a plan around and come in and meet those clear and objective requirements to make sure that we can get an approval. Because unlike the zone change plan amendment application, this is a straight subdivision. This is considered a limited land use application. So the plan that you have before you, I understand your comment, Mayor, that you expected something dramatically different, and it is dramatically different. We have parkland here that we didn't have in the original one. We lost a couple lots. Why doesn't it have the extension of Demarco Road? It's for the reasons that we've stated in our numerous submittals. And Mike Ard is here tonight to talk a little bit more about that. And I do think we made progress here, because we had 12 issues upon which staff was recommending denial. And now we're down to just 4. And of those 4, basically all of them relate to 2 issues. One is the extension of Demarco Road. The other is the parkland. As far as the parkland is concerned, we provided 1.08 acres when staff's calculations suggest that we needed 0.93. There's nothing in your development code that suggests that we have to put the park location in a specific area. I understand why the Parks Board wants it right next to Deer Point Park. But the problem with that is that if you lay the subdivision out that way, it's almost impossible to get a local street into the gap between that area and the highway such that you can develop the north part of the site. So that's the parks issue. The Demarco Road issue is a complicated one. First of all, we don't think that the city has the authority under its code to require that, but that's not why we're really proposing not to put it in there. We're proposing not to put it in there because it's very expensive. And also because, as you will hear from Dave, there was concerns about the extension of Demarco Road voiced by the public and this council, as I have learned during the Bull Run Terrace review. So what we're trying to do is learn from what happened during that case and come forward with a case that is simpler. It relies on clear and objective criteria. It meets the criteria that we have determined are clear and objective that we can predict the outcome of. And also is designed to get approved. It's as simple as that. So I do think that it was time well spent. I did not want to come here tonight and talk about all our various legal arguments. I don't think that that's what this council necessarily wants to hear. It wants to hear about the project. We think it's a good project. It has the parkland that's required. It doesn't have an extension of Demarco Road. That's true. And if you want to know more about why it doesn't have that, we've addressed that clearly in our letter. But with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dave Van Day.
Mayor and council members, Dave Van Day, address 36300 Northwest Long Road. As Garrett mentioned, it's been a journey for us. Some of you have been through part of it, but I think it's helpful just to give a quick summary. So I represent the ownership group for the property currently known as Deer Meadows. We purchased the property over 5 years ago and have been working on a development plan since. Prior to us, 2 national developers owned the property for approximately 15 years in total. It's a challenging piece of property with its shape, topography, location next to the highway, and zoning that has resulted literally in hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent on designing it over the years. After working closely with the city staff and listening to public comments, we submitted our Bull Run Terrace application, which included a zone change, a park adjacent to the existing Deer Point parkland, a landscaping buffer between the existing neighborhood and our new development, as well as constructing the extension of Demarco Road and its connection to Highway 26. With that application, we received support from the Parks and Trails Board. We received a staff recommendation for approval, we received unanimous approval from the Planning Commission, and a majority approval from City Council at its first hearing. Between the first and second hearing, the staff submitted a letter explaining a calculation error regarding the potential overall unit count. In addition, a public comment was inappropriately emailed directly to council members after the public comment period was closed. This letter was also making claims about unit count. I believe that both the miscalculation by staff and the letter contributed to some last minute confusion by the council, which ultimately resulted in a denial. During this confusion, the applicant was no longer able to comment as the council was deliberating. As you can imagine, this was very painful to watch online, knowing that if we could have only helped clarify the confusion, there possibly could have been a different outcome. Receiving a denial at the second hearing after approval at the first was something our attorney at the time had never seen happen in his 25+ years of practicing land use law. Feeling very confused ourselves as to what had just happened, we officially asked the city council to reconsider our application with the condition of approval limiting the unit count to what they understood it to be during the first hearing. This seemed like a reasonable request with a reasonable outcome being an approval with that condition added. During the reconsideration hearing, it was decided to not reconsider it, which was shocking to us as we felt we had given everything the city wanted in addition to now capping the unit count. At this point, we had invested thousands of dollars and countless hours on a plan that we felt the majority of the city would like, but had to go back to the drawing board. To simplify our current application, we removed the zoning change and worked within the parameters of the existing zoning. Excuse me. We prepared a needed housing application, which legally enabled us to remove some of the bells and whistles that were provided in the original application. This was necessary for us because under the current zoning, our unit count decreased significantly and the project no longer was financially feasible. Most notably, we eliminated the park and the extension of Demarco Road and its connection to the highway. After sharing our plan B with staff, we were immediately faced with resistance, primarily due to the lack of park and connection of Demarco to the highway. At that time, we once again asked the city if they would be interested in discussing our original application, and were told there was no interest. Later in the planning phases of this application, we also asked if the city would be interested in discussing an easement for future possible connection of Demarco and the highway, and again was informed there was no interest. It became clear to us based on this and the fact that some members of council were not in favor of the connection to the Highway 26, that the unit count was not the only issue that resulted in denial. This left us with the application we submitted under the needed housing statute, now known as Deer Meadows. This application was presented to the Planning Commission and denied. We appealed the decision to the city council and was prepared to present the same plan. We continue to brainstorm how we could possibly improve the plan and maintain its financial feasibility. We ask for and greatly appreciate you all granting us the continuance to allow us to continue to improve the plan. As a result, we were able to eliminate several small issues that were identified by staff, and most importantly, we came up with a way to include a park while only sacrificing 2 lots by utilizing the tree preservation area. Even though the proposed park is not immediately adjacent to Deer Point Parkland, it is connected and provides the space to accommodate all the amenities of the larger park that is outlined in the newest version of the park's master plan, which is primarily walking trails through trees. Oregon, along with every other state in the country, is experiencing a housing shortage crisis, especially for affordable housing. Just in the period between the denial of our original application, Bull Run Terrace, and today, inflation has skyrocketed, material prices have skyrocketed, and now mortgage rates are at an 11-year high. These are all statistics that are going the opposite direction of affordable housing. I'm personally asking you, as an owner of a very small real estate company and a native Oregonian, to do the right thing for Oregon, for Sandy, and for everyone struggling due to the housing shortage crisis, and to stop the delay in providing affordable housing by approving our application tonight. Thank you, and I'm now going to turn it over to Tracy for some additional information.
Good evening. My name is Tracy Brown, reside at 17075 Fur Drive in Sandy. I think I'm the only one on the team that resides in Sandy, as you all do. For my part of the presentation, I'd like to just give a brief context and overview of the Deer Point subdivision, which is right next door to this one, and the park that's located just west of our property. This subdivision was approved by the city of Sandy in 2005, and that parkland was dedicated in 2007. Because city code didn't require or couldn't require parkland dedication, an agreement was reached with the developer of that property to purchase this parkland from the developer, and the city reimbursed him a proportionate share of his cost with each building permit. As you know, the Bornstead Village Park and I believe the Sandy Bluff Park were also purchased with city funds. It was shortly after this time that Scott Lazenby and I proposed changes to Chapter 1786, the Parks and Open Space chapter, by tightening up some of these requirements and adding the park's fee in lieu of land requirement. These changes were later adopted by the City Council. Over the next several years, these regulations were applied to a number of developments by either requiring parkland dedication or collecting a fee in lieu of dedication. In the last few years, as the affordable housing crisis has become an ever greater issue in Oregon, case law regarding needed housing has become even more prominent. Personally, I don't recall that issue ever coming up in the 15 years I was planning director in the city of Sandy. As you've heard, needed housing developments require local governments to adopt and apply only clear and objective standards, conditions, and procedures regulating these developments. In short, adopted development standards may not have the effect of either in themselves or cumulatively of discouraging needed housing due to unreasonable cost or delay. The problem at present is the city's development code contains a considerable amount of subjective language. It's not meet the clear and objective standard. And although Kelly mentioned this otherwise, my guess is that's the reason planning staff has been working on a number of changes to fix this problem. A good example of subjective language is found in the standards in Chapter 1786 regarding the location of parkland. During the Planning Commission's hearing, we heard from David Doofman, the city attorney, that he was comfortable with the code regarding required parkland dedication because this is a formula stated in the code, but he was less comfortable with language requiring the placement of parkland in a certain location. Some of this discussion can be found in Exhibit RR, but I wasn't able to find that in your online packets. I'm not sure you have that. The proposed Deer Meadows parkland dedication will certainly provide a significant benefit for the residents of this future neighborhood, and its location and the amenities that can be offered with this park are similar to those shown on the recently adopted master plan for this park. We appreciate your consideration of these facts as you deliberate the fate of the proposed Deer Meadows subdivision. And I would be glad to answer if you have any questions. If there are none, I will turn it over to Mike Ard to discuss transportation issues with the project.
Good evening, Mike Ard with Ard Engineering. My address is 17790 Southwest Dodson Drive, Sherwood, Oregon 97140. I wanted to talk about two things. One is little more than a housekeeping thing, but it does seem necessary to talk about it. It's findings of fact number 31 refers to your standard 17.100.60E4, which is the local street volume standard that says that any local street has to not carry more than 1,000 ADT. And staff apparently could not find in the record materials where that had been addressed. So I wanted to specifically point that out for staff's benefit. It was addressed in the TIS that I prepared dated 9/27/21, page 19, under the heading Local Street Volumes. That is Exhibit CC in the record. It was also acknowledged by the city's transportation engineer, John Replinger, in his memo dated 10/6/21, which is Exhibit JJ in the record. On page 5, item 7 of that memo ends with the sentence, he concludes that all impacted local streets will continue to operate with volumes below 1,000 vehicles per day. I concur with his calculations and conclusion. So I wanted to make sure that you guys are aware that information is in the record and that approval criterion is met. The rest of my discussion focuses on Demarco Road. And as you have heard, our attorney has argued that the code does not properly incorporate the TIS and therefore cannot require that roadway to be constructed. But for me, there's more to it than that. And it comes down greatly to what I heard at the last hearing and the appeals and concerns that we heard from local residents, as well as members of the city council and indeed the mayor. And specifically, those concerns were with respect to traffic volumes on Demarco Road. What we and I specifically heard was that Demarco Road, although it's designated as a higher classification street, functions in a manner that's similar to a local street. And there are driveways that back onto that street as it exists under current conditions. When we made our application for the Deer Meadows subdivision, we prepared a transportation impact study that showed the highest volumes on that roadway would occur during the PM peak hour. And the highest volume segment, which is immediately east of Highway 211, would carry 460 vehicles per hour. Rule of thumb for transportation engineers is that the daily traffic volume is about 10 times the peak hour volume. So we're talking about 460 PM trips being approximately equal to 4,600 daily trips on that road segment. We did understand why that was a concern for you, and we took that concern seriously. When we brought forward the Deer Meadows plan, I actually studied two different options for that connection of Demarco Road. One that was a full connection.
2 minutes remaining.
Which was something that was desired by the Oregon Department of Transportation and reflected what was in your transportation system plan. I also proposed a right-in, right-out restricted one that would carry volumes in one direction as a bypass between Highway 211 and Highway 26, but would not carry volumes in the other direction. ODOT objected that that would not fulfill the standards and expectations of the TSP. But the bottom line for us was that Demarco Road in the TSP is functioning as a highway bypass that benefits ODOT, moves traffic off of Highway 26, brings it to the south through Demarco Road, and allows people to connect between Highway 211 and Highway 26 with minimal interference. The volume of traffic that was projected to be associated with that was half of the trips for the projected future condition was highway cut through traffic. So we have an existing traffic volume that was 217, or that was the background. So it was assuming some growth. We have the Deer Meadows subdivision that would add 14 PM peak hour trips to that segment. And we had highway cut through traffic that represented 229 additional trips. Now, we proposed to restrict our development, but it would have made a drop in the bucket difference. And we recognized that you were deeply concerned, even to the point of saying we need to go back and look at our comprehensive plan and start over and look at other options. So we've presented an option of a full connection. We've presented an option of a half connection. We have now presented an option of no connection. And if we can't get any of those approved, then the question becomes, what is approvable? We've given you every option that we can conceive of. One of them has to be right. We've been told no for the other options. We're asking you to say yes to this option tonight.
The time's expired.
Appreciate it.
Get a question? Or is that something we can ask now or not?
What?
You could, I would rather go through the public comment and then staff will do like a
I mean-
recap and then they'll get a rebuttal on it.
Yeah, I mean, let's do it all at once, but.
Unless Chris feels otherwise, he's looking like he's.
Well, yes, thank you. For the record, this is Chris Crane, city attorney. If you, excuse me, if you have questions of the witness, now is the time to ask those questions. If the questions are for staff, we should wait till the end of all testimony.
Go ahead, Kathleen.
Just to be clear, so the traffic count and all that you did not include the proposed C3 development land that can be developed with multifamily, true?
The projections of future traffic volumes that were prepared in the traffic study do not include that commercial development land. That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's why the number was so low.
Mayor?
Yeah, oh, yeah, Counselor Hokinson, please.
So, and Chris, I assume we're okay with questions for anybody who's testified in this period, not just the last
Yes,
speaker?
correct. Any questions for the applicant? This is a good time.
Okay, I do have some questions, and specifically, probably for Mr. Stevenson, because it was in his letter that I had many questions. And I hope you can hear me okay. I appreciate your accommodating me here. As I read through, I had a number of concerns, or obviously this idea of clear and objective standards, conditions, and procedures is very interesting, and I think it's also concerning that we would be not clear and objective in so many different areas as proposed by the letter that you sent. So the first question I have is, comment first. In your letter, you cited a reference of what clear and objective was, and it cited, the citation you cited actually included a reference to a dictionary or common definition of clear and objective, and it said, based on that definition, we can infer that many standards, and this was referring to another case years ago, did not meet the clear and objective category. Now, I'm a simple person. I'm not a law student, I'm not an attorney. When these kinds of city council land use decisions are made, do you think it's an expectation that we should be well-versed in the legal or the common definitions? What did the founders of Oregon intend for groups like ours to make these decisions?
Counselor Hokinson, I would hate to opine on what the city council should and shouldn't inquire about and consider as a general matter. That's more of a question for your city attorney. However, we raise the arguments for really three reasons. Number one is that they explain and in some cases are the basis for the difference between the plan you have before you today and the plan that Dave Vandehey talked about a little bit earlier. Number two is that we think that the arguments are correct, and we definitely think that that the council should consider them. And I think that, you know, whether something is clear, objective or not is something that the council should think about. not only when it's reviewing quasi judicial land use applications, but of course when it's writing code. But the third reason is that one of the things that we lawyers have to do that annoys the heck out of everybody is that we have to preserve all of our arguments. So anything that is a legal argument that we have that we may want to use down the line, whether we know we're going to use it or not, we have to make sure it's in there and that is presented to this council for its consideration. So that, I hope, explains why you see the arguments that you do in our application. But as to whether the city should embark on a specific policy of how it discusses clear and objective criteria or writes those criteria, I would really defer to Chris Crane on that.
So I read in the dictionary today that clear is easy to perceive, understand, or interpret. Would you agree with that interpretation?
What Luba has said is that, and this is a case called Warren v. Washington County. And what the Land Use Board of Appeals has said that I use as my sort of definition when I look at these codes is that there needs to be objective. I think the term, and I'm trying to remember a Luba case, so bear with me, but I think the term that Luba used in that case is objective benchmarks for measurement. In other words, you can look at that and there can't be two ways to think about that criterion. So if you have something that says, for example, a code provision that says provide for development opportunities in abutting properties, that's a really common one throughout the state. What does that mean? Does it mean that we have to build roads to the outside of the project to make sure that they can connect in the future? Does it mean that we have to grade in a certain way? I use that as an illustrative point, basically because I think it's helpful to understand the difference between, say, a development standard, like your setback needs to be 20 feet from between the right of way and your front door versus a more aspirational standard. So I look for objective benchmarks for determining compliance. Whether that fits into a dictionary definition of that, I don't know. I just go by what the Land Use Board of Appeals says.
Well, that's fair, but the original clear and objective standard did start and originate with a dictionary definition. The second question, the definition of objective, not influenced by personal feelings or opinions in considering and representing facts, a thing aimed at or sought, a goal. Would you agree with those definitions? Or would you cite the previous test?
I think I've told you how I look at the clear and objective standard.
Okay, well, let me move on. Then. I'm sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, I was just, the case law that we've cited is the governing case law. There are definitions of clear and objective. I think that they're out of a dictionary that Luba uses all the time. Those are referenced in our letters, but I wish I had the definitions in front of me, Counselor. I do not, but I can tell you that what I look for is whether I can look at a code and know exactly how I can fulfill it.
So the opposite of clear and objective, obviously, you end up with vague, opaque, murky, arbitrary, those kinds of words. The question I have for you now is in relation to each of the points. Let's take the transportation system plan and its inclusion, and the point that it maybe shouldn't have been included because maybe the policy wasn't correctly written or some other nuance. But from a clear and objective and from a consistency and a not murky perspective, did your client understand the city's requirement for roads? Now, I heard lots of testimony that a counselor may have said this or somebody may have said that, but I'm talking about in working with Tracy, was he consistent in terms of his application of the standard to your client from day one? Or has he been all over the place and arbitrary?
Counselor Hokinson, I'm sorry, I don't know if I quite understand where you're going with this question. Is it a question about our project or is it a question about my client's state of mind when he put the project together?
Well, not your client's state of mind, no, our planning. So if we're not clear and objective, then I'm assuming we're arbitrary or unclear. And I'm just trying to understand where we've been unclear. Can you,
So I will say
I mean,
that, so with Demarco Road, the issue there, and it's explained in our letter, is that the requirement for Demarco Road's extension stems from the city's transportation system plan. And that transportation system plan has not been incorporated into the city's land use regulations, which is a standard that applies to a limited land use decision like a subdivision. So when we came forward with the plan amendment and zone change, that's not a limited land use decision, and the requirement for incorporation isn't there. But when you have a subdivision, that requirement is there. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about Demarco Road. The clear and objective standards of some of the other things that we've talked about in our letters.
so when was it described that this Demarco Road extension was being required by our planning department?
I wouldn't be the person to answer that question because I do not have all of the project background. I'm the second attorney on this one. So if you'd like to ask some of the folks behind me, I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you, but I can't answer.
You're welcome to phone a friend, but I would like to know when it was not clear.
So Counselor Hokinson, I've already told you, I can't answer that because I wasn't involved at that time.
Is there somebody, can the applicant answer?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure I completely understand the question, but I think this will maybe answer your question. Basically, just gonna speak very bluntly. I felt like we're backed into a corner with this application. Many of you that are on the council today were on the council that denied it during the second hearing that put us in this position. So when we had to go back to the drawing board to a plan B with not a zoning change, and as you guys hopefully recall, the purpose of the zoning change was to allow us to have a unit count that would make the project financially feasible. I think I gave some history. I think several of you know the history of the property that's sat there vacant with blackberries and now some homeless people for years and years and years, as it was owned by other very large national developers that couldn't figure out a way to make it work. And it's because they couldn't get the unit count in there under the zoning. So that's when we came up with a strategy to rezone it in a way that we could get the unit count that would justify it financially. So that's what we proposed with the park, with the connect.
Did the city ever suggest that it would be okay or move ahead without the US 26 connection?
I would say yes. During the city council hearings for the first application, which was Bull Run Terrace, there were at least two, maybe more comments from separate counselors that they were not in favor of that connection due to the things that Mike was pointing out with the traffic. I think we could go on and talk about the issues with that connection as well. I mean,
we could, but let's follow that up. You believe that two independent counselors represent the direction of the city?
I'm sorry, but Don, I just gotta interrupt. A few of us are looking at each other, trying to figure out where we're going here. If it needs to be,
Let me wrap up.
it needs to be clear in our code, not in the conversations between staff and the applicant.
Yeah, I'm just want to, once again, I think the attorney, Mr. Stevenson, set it up well. When we're presenting a case, we want to make sure we have as much as we can. We've covered all the bases. And what I'm hearing is that we don't have any, the city hasn't been arbitrary in their application of the code. It doesn't sound like. We haven't, in other words, if another developer were to come forward and that same property, he would get approved for something that you brought forward. It doesn't feel like it's been arbitrary or capricious. It feels like you've known what the city has asked for all along. And so I guess my summary then it feels like then the whole case is just, well, you didn't write your code correctly and you didn't put the right words in it, so therefore it doesn't meet the legal tests, and it doesn't, none of these standards apply. And that's the case, I guess, right?
Well, if I could just finish my point without an interruption. I was getting to the point of kind of why we're at where we are today. And so we did do all those things. We did provide you the connection. We provided the park. We did everything the city wanted. We had staff approval. We had unanimous planning commission accepting it. And it came here and you denied it. So we did do everything you asked for. Then we were asked to come back with another plan, or I guess we weren't asked. We could just leave the property vacant and take a loss and move on. But we came up with another plan. And what happened is I asked our attorney at the time, which was not Garrett. I said, we can't come up with another plan using the current zoning that's going to pencil out for us with the connection, with the park, with all of these amenities. I specifically asked him, I said, is there a requirement to have the Demarco connection? And he said, that's a good question. And that led him to go back and dig in, and you're now hearing the results of his analysis, which was, no, they actually can't. And I said, well, okay, then that's one way we can make this plan B work, if we don't have to spend that massive amount of money on that connection. So I think hopefully that goes round circle for you, and that's what changed. Is I asked the question, do we actually have to provide that connection? And I was told.
Go ahead.
I have one more question. Can you stay up there, please? Can I go ahead, Mayor?
Please do.
You started off with saying that you had to have a certain unit count to make this pencil out. And the frustration that I have here is that we don't really have the unit count. What we have is, I believe, 30 units of R1, and we have a mention that there could be 66 or 68 in R2. But it's not clear, it's not spelled out anywhere. There's no mention of how many units there will be in the C3. None of that was incorporated into the traffic studies. And so I'm trying to clarify, if I've missed it, I want to have this opportunity for you to tell me, where in your proposal does it say the true unit count that you're going to have for this whole 15-acre development, so that we can understand actually what the traffic's going to be? Do you have that somewhere in that I missed, other than what I just lined out that I had read?
No, there's not a specific number, but I'm glad you asked that question, because I'm not an expert in this, and I didn't want to interrupt during Kelly's presentation, but I was going to ask our attorney. I was actually a little bit confused by the presentation that we were talking about the C3 and the R2, because I thought we were here for the application for the R1. Are we incorporating those other lots into this whole? Okay.
Yeah.
We are, but it needs to further design review to figure out the exact.
Right.
Just plat it first, and then engineer it next.
Right, but the park acres and the traffic studies all are based on how many units are going to be on that 15 acres. And without having those critical numbers, it's very difficult for anybody to determine how much parkland we need, and how much, traffic, what the traffic studies look like, and how much road, traffic's going to be on the roads and things like that. So that's just my question, and I appreciate you.
Well, we did do that with the original application, and with the exception of, I believe there was a range provided, because I don't believe it is possible to specifically calculate the exact number of units, because we don't know what we're going to do in that C3. It requires some retail space, it requires commercial. We don't have a complete plan for that. So I don't think it's possible to answer that question.
A range. Yeah.
Right. But we did provide a range.
Not with the C3, not that I'm aware of.
I think there was a cap.
No.
Wasn't there a
No.
max?
No. That's what I looked for. Thank you, though.
I don't think there was unlimited
I'll
units.
address our side in our. recap.
Yeah, so all I want to say about the multifamily piece is that I assume, and I would look to Kelly on this one, but I assume that there are density ranges that are allowable within that zone. And the idea, the way the subdivision is laid out the way it is because you've got, and I think this might help explain some things. You've got single family that's kind of along here and then multifamily over here. And so to lay it all out, to lay out roads that you need to serve the lots and so forth, you have to include all of that in the subdivision. There's not a development proposal before you for either the mixed commercial zone or the multifamily zone right now, because we got to make sure we know what the property is going to be configured like. And the way we get to that point is through a subdivision application that acknowledges the single family property that you got to go through to get there. So the multifamily and commercial zone projects will be within the density ranges that are allowable under those zones at the time that somebody goes in and develops them.
All right.
Can I add just one more thing to try to give you a little more specificity regarding that? Because I see that you are very concerned about unit count. And I had a little bit of a discussion with the project team to try to shed some light on this. As the project is currently proposed exclusive of the C3 zone, the number of project trips that comes through on that segment of Demarco Road that was a concern was 23. It represents about 7.5% of the total future traffic volume on there. If we managed to double the size of the development with what we did in the C3, the total traffic that's added by the C3 would represent about 10% of what the cut through traffic would be associated with the Demarco Road connection. So I hope that gives you some idea of the scales that we're talking about. And I hope that it also intuitively in the back of your mind makes you recognize that when Kelly was talking about the uncertainty of what traffic volumes look like in the future without the Demarco Road connection, the certainty is there will be less traffic without that connection than with it.
All right, moving forward to public testimony. Guidelines for those who wish to speak. Please try to avoid repetition. If someone else has already expressed the same thoughts, it is sufficient to state that you agree with the statements of a previous speaker, even if that's all you say. If you have documents, maps, or letters that you wish to have considered by the body, they must formally be placed into the record of this proceeding. To do that either before or after you speak, please email your materials to recorder@ci.sandy.or.us and staff will make sure your evidence is properly processed. Testimony for this public hearing will be called for in 3 groups. Testimony in favor of the proposal, testimony opposed to the proposal, and neutral testimony. For those joining us in person this evening, please raise your hand at the appropriate time to indicate you'd like to speak and wait to be recognized. If you're participating online, click the raised hand button at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. If you're participating via telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand and wait to be recognized. I will call on each person when it's their turn to speak. Each participant will receive up to 3 minutes to testify, and Jeff, our city recorder, will let you know when you have 20 seconds remaining. Our council rules require each person to state their name and address for the record. I will now call for testimony in favor of the subdivision proposal. A reminder to state your name and mailing address for the record, and you'll have up to 3 minutes. Jeff will provide a 20-second warning.
Okay, Mayor, just looking for any raised hands. And Mayor, I do not see any raised hands.
Thank you. I'm now calling for testimony against the subdivision proposal. Another reminder to state your name and mailing address for the record, up to 3 minutes each, and Jeff will provide that 20-second warning.
And Mayor, I do not see any raised hands.
I'm now calling for neutral testimony. These are general comments, neither for nor against the proposal. A reminder to state your name and mailing address for the record. You'll be provided 3 minutes, and Jeff will still be able to provide that 20-second warning.
And Mayor, I do not see any raised hands.
All right, I will now call for the staff recap and recommendation. Kelly.
Yeah, so the recommendation stays the same. I will recap a few things. The no authority to install Demarco Road is a very interesting question. I'm not an attorney, so it's really hard for me to step too far out onto a branch. And reading some of the new case law from Silverton and other cities over the last 2 or 3 years, it's very interesting the position that LUBA has taken on some of these. But what I will say is I'll just repeat what I said earlier. For at least 2 TSPs now, and that we've had Demarco Road in the TSP. I will address Councilor Hokinson's question. The staff has been very clear the entire time that Demarco Road is required and needed. And one thing I have told the applicant, and I went back and watched some of the video as well. While there was some concern, I think, expressed by different people about Demarco Road, my interpretation of the denial of Bull Run Terrace is because of the increase in density and vehicle trips related to the zone change was the reason for the denial, not because of the Demarco Road connection. So I think those are 2 separate things. And I don't want to conflate the 2 and say that they're one and the same thing. The other questions around density in the C3. So first of all, I'll go to the R1. There's 28 lots, which means there's now a maximum of 56 dwelling units. Will it be built with 56 dwelling units? Most likely not. There'll be probably a mix of single family homes and duplexes. When you go to the R2, I believe the density range is 38 to 66. The C3, I know their attorney asked me to talk more about that, but I think it would be, I learned my lesson during the Bull Run Terrace application about 1.5 years ago. So I'm not going to even try to do that. I have no idea what the applicant's intent would be with that property. So I don't know how much commercial would be there. I also don't know if the applicant, this applicant or a future applicant would argue that it's needed housing and it's not clear and objective. And therefore, I don't know how to interpret the code without knowing their different arguments that they may make. There's also site design features, which I doubt would be used, but such as like parking garages and different things like that. And if you could store some of the parking underground, then the density calculation would be different than just all surface parking. So I think there's too many unknowns, especially with applicants hiring attorneys and arguing clear and objective, for me to even take a wild guess at what the density range should be on that property. And so for that purpose, I don't want to mislead the council or the public and give you a number that would then be wrong in the future. So I'm going to steer clear of that. I'm just going to be very honest. I think that summarizes a couple of points I wanted to make. I don't know if our attorney's office would like to make any comments. I don't know. I'll turn it to Chris at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. There are a couple of things I would like to say. With respect to the clear and objective test, if you look at its page 4 in the applicant's letter, they set out portions of the test and characterize the test as befits their case. But the test remains whether a criterion imposes a subjective value-laden analysis. In the letter, they say that if a standard is capable of more than one interpretation, then it's not clear and objective. But that's not what LUBA has said. LUBA has expressly rejected that formulation. They have expressly said that just because a standard is capable of 2 or more interpretations does not mean it's clear and objective on its face. The question is whether it presents a subjective value-laden analysis. And Mr. Stevenson is absolutely correct that there has been a sea change in the laws in this regard over the last about 3 years, both in the statutes the legislature has passed and in LUBA's case law interpreting a number of those statutes. So it is a bit of a moving target, but that much has not changed. A clear and objective standard cannot involve subjective value-laden analysis, but it's not necessarily the case that it can only be susceptible of a single interpretation. There can be more than one interpretation of a code provision. The other thing is, in the Silverton case, a recent case in which that involved the quote incorporation standard, end quote, for a limited land use decision, which this is. The statute says that if there is a provision in your comprehensive plan, including your TSP, and you want to apply it to a quasi-judicial subdivision application like this one, it has to be incorporated into your development code. So the question is whether the connection requirement for Demarco is sufficiently incorporated into your development code. It's interesting and I think illustrative, maybe compelling, that in the prior application, which has been frequently bandied about here, so I think it's fair game, the applicant had no question whether or not that connection was required. They were under no illusions that it was not required. The standards were apparently clear and objective in that case. And only since some of the changes in the law that we have seen over the last 3 years has the applicant concluded that maybe there's a way to knock out that standard so that we don't have to comply with it. But previously, there was no question that they had to comply with that connection requirement in the TSP. So based on that, if nothing else, it was clear and objective before. How did it not become clear and objective now? And with respect to the standard itself, in the Silverton case, that case also involved a TSP and a code standard that required compliance with certain TSP standards, but they were performance standards that involved a range of standards. There were a number of standards that could have applied, others that did not. It wasn't clear. And the city tried to interpret those. Here, the standard is whether the street pattern is connected. The word connected is not susceptible of multiple interpretations. It's either connected or it's not. And is consistent with the comprehensive plan, which might be clear and might be more subjective. But then the standard goes on to say, or the official street plan for the city of Sandy. For this part of the city in the TSP, there are not multiple street plans presented in the TSP. There simply is not the range of options that was the case in the Silverton Luba decision. So I think that the standard here is much more objective than was the case in Silverton. Again, that was just another case involved a limited land use decision and the application of the city's TSP. I think your standard is more defensible here. That said, Mr. Stevens is exactly right. Some of this is uncharted territory and it's up to the council to decide. But I did want you to have at least those thoughts as you go through your deliberations.
Kelly, would you mind taking us through a little bit more on some of the issues on those frontage improvements? I mean, so we feel like we have standing to require those.
What I'll say is that in my 17 years of Oregon land use planning and then my 11 years here, this is the first application that I've had the argument that if you're not making connection to a road, that road would not then need to have frontage improvements. We've had plenty of examples around the city of Sandy where there's roads, existing roads or future roads without access to those, and the applicants have been required to make frontage improvements. This is the first time I've dealt with it. So I don't know if our attorney's office has examples to point to, but this is kind of uncharted territory for me. I've never heard of this before.
Right.
That just because you're not making access to a road, you don't have to do what the code says for the frontage.
Right.
Never heard of that.
Okay.
It's very hard for me to answer because before receiving these letters, I had no idea that was something that would even be challenged, to be quite honest.
Okay.
Thank
you. All right. Without any additional, do you have more report? I apologize.
Yeah, Jordan, remind me. Yeah, a good example of this, I think. So this is a really good example is actually there's two that I can think of that were recent. They're both commercial that I'm thinking of, but I'm sure there's residential examples out there as well. But Tractor Supply, Space Age gas station. So they had access to a different street, a lower classification street. In both cases, they did the frontage improvements along Highway 26. If I thought about it, I'm sure I could think of a lot of residential examples as well.
Okay, thank you. All right. Seeing no further questions for staff, I'll call on the rebuttal by the applicant. Reminder, you have up to 10 minutes and Jeff will provide you a 2-minute warning.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Once again, Garrett Stevenson for the applicant. I'm not going to take 10 minutes. I think that I think most of the issues have been pretty well discussed here tonight. As far as Mr. Crane's comments about our legal positions, if you look at page 4 of our letter, we're talking about the exact same standard. So maybe I cited a case with a slightly different riff on it than he would have liked, but we both cited the key case, which is the standard he referenced, whether it imposes a subjective value laden analysis. And I think that that's consistent with the example and hypothetical I talked about earlier, when you're talking about what do you do to adapt your subdivision plan to the neighborhood? Well, we're looking for something, if we're applicants, that tells us what we have to do to meet that standard. And that's really, I think, why we are where we're at today, both here in this city with this project, but also with some of the changing case law. And I want to say a couple words about that. But before I forget, on the Demarco Road extension, I think that I don't want the council to lose sight of the difference between the incorporation requirement between the last application and this one. The last application was a post-acknowledgement plan amendment, and it is not required in that application for all the applicable criteria to have been incorporated into the city's zone code. It is for a subdivision, which is why there's that difference here. So I want to make sure I responded to your city attorney's point there. And I think that's frankly our primary argument with Demarco Road. But the other arguments with both Demarco Road and with the frontage improvements is that there's been no showing that those requirements have been, that there's a nexus between those improvements and our project. In other words, where is the city's evidence, which the city is required to provide in requiring these sorts of development exactions, that demonstrates that our impacts are going to be so great that we need to build, more than $500,000 potentially of frontage improvements on a road that we don't access, or a extension of one of the city's TSP facilities. That is something I'm sure you've heard of. That's the Nolan and Dolan analysis that relates to the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. That's something I haven't really hammered on, but given the testimony of your city attorney, I think it bears mentioning that when it comes to the frontage improvements, those are subject to the Nolan and Dolan rough proportionality test, as is the requirement to dedicate and to improve Demarco Road. But at the end of the day, here's where I think we stand. And we have an application here that, while it might not seem like it, it has come a long way. And while city staff and we don't agree on some of the key issues here, we agree on most of the non-key issues and most of the fundamentals of the land use plan. I think that the fact of the matter is that what's before the council tonight is a decision on whether or not it believes that it can require Demarco Road, or whether or not it even wants to. And if you heard Mr. Art's testimony, I think that that second question bears some thought. But you've got the full story in front of you. You've understood how we came from something that staff, I think it's fair to say, would have loved to see, which was our last plan, something the council did not want. And now we have a plan here that is feasible, not only from a monetary standpoint, but it's feasible because we're looking to see what we can get approved. It takes a lot of money and time to develop these projects. And when you come forward with something with that much work that went into it, like the prior plan, if you're going to try again, you're going to look for a way to have some predictability. And that gets back to what the needed housing statutes are all about, what the incorporation statutes are all about. It's about predictability. It's about knowing what you can do with your land. And it's not, I'm not impugning the city's code whatsoever. The city's code is about like every other code in Oregon. They're built with what the planners developed through, all the way from the 1970s through onto the present. And I used to be a planner, and I'm very used to dealing with codes, and they all have things that are not clear and objective in them. And we make, as applicants, we make every effort to meet those. But when we're in a situation where we have a really good reason to believe that whether or not we meet those is going to be unpredictable, we're going to look for a way to come up with a plan that meets the bottom line of what the code is. And that's where we take the subjectivity out of it. Whether or not it's, you know, how each standard is not clear and objective, that's something for LUBA to decide. But I think I want you to understand as the council why you're seeing what you're seeing. It's an effort on our part to create a plan that can have some predictability about its chances of success. And that's exactly what the clear and objective standards were intended to do. That's why the legislature made that a bigger deal in 2017. And you'll probably hear about that again in the future. And, you know, I guess what my hope is that you recognize the total course of dealing here, and that we are serious applicants. We've done a lot of hard work on this site. We're trying to figure out a way to develop it. And once again, it's been zoned for single family residential. It's been zoned for commercial. It's been zoned for multifamily. That's the policy decision that this council and its predecessor councils have taken. What it hasn't been zoned for is a public park. We provided the amount of parkland required under your code as per what your planning director asked for. And I don't think anybody's arguing tonight that there's a clear way to force or even require an applicant to put the parkland in a certain spot. And I think that my clients did his best to put the parkland in a spot where it could connect with the Deer Point property as best as possible. But at the end of the day, we've met that. We've met basically every other clear and objective criterion, which is why you went from a big list of appeal issues down to just a couple. So we hoped that spending this extra time would help us all focus on what the primary issues are here. We really appreciate the council's indulgence in giving us this extra time. We know this is not an easy application. This is not how, frankly, any of us on the development side like to present applications. But frankly, I don't think my client has any choice at this point. We have to find a way to come up with a plan that we know we have some legal predictability that can be approved. So with that, I just want to thank staff. I know this wasn't fun for them either, but I think that they've done a really good job in allowing us to work through a lot of the issues that came up with the original version of this plan. We've cleared the decks. We focused on the issues that we think matter, and hopefully that will make your deliberations a bit easier tonight. And then as a procedural matter, I just want to clarify what we're asking this council. Under ORS 197-522 sub 3, we have the option to come with a
2 minutes remaining.
Thanks. With a proposed condition of approval that we believe will meet the city's zoning code and plan. And that's what the attachment, the revised plan is. So what we're asking you to do is approve the application with a condition of approval that says you will prepare a final plat that is substantially consistent with our revised plan, which shows the parkland, shows the pathways we're proposing, and approve the application on that basis. So thank you for your attention. Appreciate you hanging in there with us. Thank you for the extra time. And I want to thank staff again for working with us to get it to this point.
Any questions for the applicants? Remember, this is your final opportunity to do so before we enter into discussion. All right, then I will call for a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
For a second.
Second.
There's plenty of seconds.
Motion from Counselor Pietzel, the second from Counselor Sheldon to close the public hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nays. Motion carries. We'll be closing the public hearing at 8:25 p.m. Today's what, the 18th?
Yep.
Yeah, April 18th. All right, discussion. Who wants to go first?
I don't know, some of you guys have been writing feverishly.
One of the challenges, as I said, was with this proposal is that the developer has not disclosed the total unit count clearly. And I get that, the C3 is difficult to pin down, but using a range is how you determine this. It could be a minimum of this, but a maximum of that. On number, and the reason that that's important is because it helps us inform how much parkland is dedicated, what the transportation and traffic studies should be, and what the traffic patterns are going to look like in that area. The finding number 24, the required parkland dedication calculations did not include any residential units on the C3. So what we're getting is already underestimated for necessary park acreage. The parkland should actually be larger based on the addition of the C3. But that aside, the existing park code that we have, I heard there was a lot of kind of dissing the existing park code. And we've lived with that park code successfully for 20 plus years. And we've got quite a few parks as a result of that, where land was dedicated as part of the development. And that's really important because all the development in the houses and the multifamily around that are using those parks. So it's critical to have a big enough park and to make sure we have that process. This code, the existing park code was based on the previous Parks and Trails plan. This development came under that old plan. We're looking at changing our parks code language because we have a new Parks and Trails master plan that would have been a whole different ball of wax for you all to deal with. And, but your grandfather did. So I just want to clarify that the changes are based on the new Parks and Trails plan, way more so than some kind of shortcomings in the existing plan. Like I said, it's served us well all these years. The proposed development, I want to be really clear here because I'm pretty familiar with the Parks Code. Does not meet 17.86.20 requiring homes to face the park and be continuous. 17.86.20 number 2 says the required dedication shall be contained as a contiguous unit and not separated into pieces or divided by roadways. Okay, that's really clear to me anyways. The proposed parkland is in 2 separate parcels and not contiguous to the 3rd parcel of existing parkland. Another part, 17.8640, says that land dedication is at the city's discretion only. The following factors shall be used in the choice of whether to accept land or cash in lieu. Compatibility with the Parks and Trails master plan, and D, the availability of previously acquired property. So here we have this previously acquired parkland, and there was, and in your first go around, you did add additional acreage on and make it one big contiguous unit. But what we have now is basically a little strip, but then this other parkland that basically fronts the highway and is in people's backyards and is not really visible from the neighborhood. And you can see it as you run, rush by at 50 miles an hour. So I think it is pretty clear and objective to me what we were looking for there. You all have the creativity of how you can make it contiguous and how that fits into your plan, but I don't believe that was done in this case. But I believe our criteria are fairly clear and objective. The traffic studies did not include the C3 land, and I'm not sure, I didn't get into the meat of all the traffic studies, but again, the importance of having the traffic studies, but also having this traffic plan that you have proposed in here is to make sure that you are looking at this whole 15-acre parcel. There's a bunch of C3 land there. How many acres of C3 is it? 5, 3, 4? Anyway.
I think it's about 3.
Yeah, so
Might be a little
anyways, it's
less
right
than
on
that.
the highway. And so the idea that we've got commercial land, the intention there is that people going along the highway would see this commercial land and be able to kind of turn off of Demarco and then probably, get into the commercial land, commercial areas and have that develop as commercial. As it stands now, I have no idea how anybody would find that commercial if they saw it, how they would find their way around. It'd be pretty challenging to do that. So that's why, that Demarco connection was really important, is to give you that connection to our commercial land, of which is very important. And I'm just going to say right now, if you'd have come in with Demarco Road and the highway improvements and, even halfway, attempt at the parkland, I'd have been all over supporting this development. But those are kind of real deal breakers when I see that we're going to be having all this, multifamily and you've got the Demarco Road, which is somebody said it's a local street. Well, it doesn't serve, it may look like a local street because it's got some driveways on it. I live on Bluff Road. It's got tons of driveways on it. And Bluff Road is it's like a major, or at least a minor arterial. So Demarco Road is one of our, and I guess Kelly, is it a minor arterial, Demarco? It is.
I believe you're correct.
Yes.
I don't have it right in front of me.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's a minor arterial. It's not a local street. And so, it's intended to kind of get people and these neighborhoods cleared out instead of trying to kind of divert all this traffic onto local streets. So I think it's really important to, what you've done is actually put parcels, develop parcels on our existing Demarco right of way, which is, yes, you did. Yes, look at your map. Yeah. You've got, lots.
The hearing's closed.
Okay, yeah, right.
That's goes both ways.
Okay, yeah. But anyway, yeah, my understanding of it is that you've got, anyway. My concern is that we've got, we've got lots in lots, well, I'm gonna just say lots, lot 3, 9, 10, 11, 12, and the big one, 30, are all taking up the right of way for Demarco Road. So I believe. So anyway, that's my real concern, is that we haven't addressed the necessary improvements for Demarco. We haven't dealt with the off-street improvements or the improvements on Highway 26. And again, we wanted we wanted Deer Point Park to have, as the code lines out, some contiguous connection to the existing part of the park. And that didn't happen. It did happen in the first time go around, as did Demarco Road. So we know you all are capable of it. And like I said, I would have supported this had we had those components of the plan. Thanks.
It's just for clarity, it's 2.84 acres, the C3,
How much did you say?
2.84.
Thank you. Lori, you have a hand up?
Yeah, I just want to weigh in on the Demarco. There is no world where I will support Demarco Road dumping out on 26. Unless we are going to make it inaccessible to truck traffic, put a bunch of roundabouts and get ODOT to put a light. We've got massive accidents on Highway 26 at Langensan. We've got accidents at Furwood. You think there won't be accidents at Demarco with people trying to get out at what is that, almost 55 miles an hour from a residential area? Several of you guys live on Demarco as it is and are constantly talking about truck traffic. What do you think is going to happen if that empties out on Highway 26? That becomes a thoroughfare. That's a recipe for disaster. And I believe I was a dissenting voice on that the last time this application came up, and I will continue to be. I do not support Demarco Road dumping out on Highway 26.
Yeah, I don't have problems with it not connecting to 26 myself. Just as
Are you planning to change our TSP?
So listen.
That was not upgrade.
Listen, and
Yeah.
we just
I'm
went,
just
we just
asking,
went on
you
our,
know.
we just, we allowed others to talk for a
Yeah,
while, right?
Appreciate that.
But no, I communicated severe problems with that at our last meeting on this issue. I continue to have problems with that. I think that the same folks responsible and were around at the time for that TSP and for it to be in absolutely gave us no alternative ways for our traffic around Highway 26. There was opportunities with Demarco to build Demarco as a sort of bypass, and council went through and wanted to be a windy road, you know, with housing around it, and then throws our arms up when we're shocked that that's what's happening, and that we have, you know, semis driving down there. Yes, I have major problems. I'd love to see the TSP changed to reflect that. I have major problems though with not getting frontage improvements on Highway 26. I think this council should be well aware of how expensive and how long it takes to get frontage improvements on Highway 26. And I think that that's a major problem with this application. I'll be honest, I feel like we looked at it to get this thing penciled out, and we said, great, we might not have to connect to the road, and maybe we can get out of these frontage opportunities. And I think, well, now that we get a new housing development, we absolutely get no real strong benefit for our community other than additional housing, which is a benefit in itself. But I don't know, I have other concerns, but those are two of them just feeding off of this conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll start. So, as Lori always knows, I like to say how long I've been here. But that goes back to being on planning with Tracy sitting across over there and having approved multiple subdivisions back when I was on the planning commission, starting 18 years ago. And we'll go with the road. And I respect the disagreement on the connection. Sure. There's a lot to that. And I think as I said before, I hold the most traffic of that in front of my house, more than anyone else sitting on this council. And I said that before, but I also said that that is not why I was, denying that plan before. Was not because of that road. I think the road is in the TSP, regardless if we like it or not, or the realignment of the whole thing. That's where we're at today on that. And without that, I think it changes a lot of things. I think there's other ways of mitigating that traffic through roundabouts or speed humps or whatever in that area as well to help mitigate that. And yes, I've sat here and complained about the traffic coming down Lancaster and around. But I also believe that there should be some mitigations on the traffic for that as well. I think at that point, there was also, we've always had in there that there'd be a light. That going back that far, there was Vista Loop north and south. They were both approved. And this application is not about past applications in that aspect, but just to give history for context, right? Because of that, we have, what I did bring up, the alignment looked off from the previous ones, knowing how much was steady for the across the street on that connection going forward. And the only way to get that light in there, that as we've discussed in the past, was to have road connected, obviously. Yes, it's a dangerous section of the road and it does need to be slowed down. That being said, the alignment in there, Kathleen touched on this a little bit, but how does someone access that commercial land if there's not access off the highway? So then we have the village commercial. Well, the only way to access that in the future would be to come across all these other roads down Lancaster, down to Demarco, go off and to get to that, adding the traffic to that, right? Unless there was going to be some proposal to do a zone change to change that into housing or something and not be commercial on that. But the land next to it is also zone commercial as well, which was to piggyback off that. You would not want another exit on or off the highway farther down from the Vista Loop on the north side of that, because that is the logical place with the roads being on both sides. You wouldn't want to have that. ODOT has stated even in here that they recommend to require this access to this aspect. They would not do that for a one-off business or something like that, as we well know from the other end of our town in that process. So we may not like where long before my time or anybody else's and where that might have landed, or some of the other pieces of what Demarco looks like. And I live right on it. It affects me the highest. But I do believe that they still is the best for that, and restricts the rest of the properties around it. The frontage requirement, that's just a non-starter. And the fact that every other location we've required that, and it has been required. Look at the millions of dollars we're spending on the north side to bring in that all the way down there. Those aren't going to be developed. The land right next to it, the Deer Point, there is not commercial, it's residential, and it has that sidewalk that goes down there as well. And other requirements that may be needed, as well as the ones pointed out on the other end of town. You know, we're spending millions of dollars on that, and it's been required by the developers in all areas of the city there to require the frontage on their property, even though parts of it weren't even developed on that side of it. So those are my comments on that. And coming back to the other development there, you know, yes, half this council, part of this council was here on the first vote, and part of this wasn't. It was a different council. And so that always has played into effect between them. But I think the other thing on that was the number of units changed. And that was the deciding factor for that. If they recall the videos of that coming back, knowing on one vote, we had one number, and then the next time we went to the second vote, the number had changed. Of how many units were on that. So I think you gotta really think about the rest of that commercial land and how you're accessing it. Are you gonna be driving through all these residential neighborhoods to go up to a commercial land, and what kind of that? And that's one reason why, you know, it's along that highway. You know, you don't stick commercial land out in the middle of, you know, it's all along some type of major road. So let's go, Carl.
Okay, I agree with several comments. I disagree with some comments too, but I want to start out with, I forget the lawyer's name for the proponent, but I really agree with the fact that in terms of clear and objective, in terms of being able to be predictable about what kind of decisions that the city government will make is just crucial in any kind of development proposal. Because you can't change the business halfway down the road. If you got, in this case, I'm going to go for the Demarco Road. It's on our TSP. It's been on there for ages. And the fact that the proponent had already proposed Demarco to be on there, one of the early on, probably the earliest proposal, indicates that everybody knew that it was supposed to be there and that it went to Highway 26. Like it or not, predictability, the TSP, there's enough things in there that says to me that everybody knows that Demarco should have gone to and should go to 26. I don't like the idea of the intersection with 26. I get that issue with you, Councilor Smallwood, but the TSP says it's been that way for a long time. So to me, for predictability and for the ability for us to stand on our plans, Demarco should go. And for the reasons that Councilor Pietzel talked about, how do you access the commercial ground without a Demarco? I just don't see how you do that without putting some sort of connection to 26. It just has to be that way. There are some difficulties when it comes to the way that I saw the original proposal vote by the council. I thought it was as much about density changes and variances were over. They're asking for more density than we felt comfortable with. And I thought that was a big reason for saying no to the development last time. I think that's, to me, I get the part that there were some council opinions that the Demarco was a problem, but I thought that the biggest thing that we didn't like about the previous one was the density and the changes that were pushed along and pushed over the top. And I think that still, for me, is something that needs to be stayed with in this particular development proposal. I don't see any issues with clear and objective statements in our code at this point. With the conversations I heard, I just didn't see the logic there that the developer had made anything clear to me. So I don't see the reasons why we should be saying that this is doesn't have clear and objective. I think it does have that.
certainly the conversation about changing our code is not about the clear and objective. It's about cleaning up our code. The issues about the C3 being able to understand the calculations on how many road travel we're going to have on that is something that I know in the past we have always looked at it as what does that mean to us? And if it doesn't mean that we can have traffic on that from the C3 development, we have to figure out some kind of solution. I remember a development down there by the athletic club. There was lots of conversations about how some of those lots would not make the TSP or the ODOT satisfaction of number of traffics onto the highway. And we left those undecided at that time until we got a proposal that would find a solution. And maybe there's a solution that we're not looking at right now that would fit that traffic pattern. So for me, I'm not as concerned about the C3 traffic. I am concerned about access to it. Park doesn't bother me as much. I don't like the location. I think it's the wrong spot for it, but to me, I don't see that there is a strong reason for mandating it being up against the other Deer Park park. It was intended to be there. I love the idea of it being there. I just don't see that it is as strong as some of the things like the Demarco Road. And again, I agree. I'm not going to go into big detail. I think that a development along the 26 with all of those sidewalk and curb and those developments that need to be improved on that, that's got to be done. I just don't see us walking away from that. So with that, I'm going to leave it alone. I just don't think that this one is going to make it for me.
Yeah, I want to start out by saying I recognize and understand your plight and your challenges that you're presented with. And I thank you for trying to come and meet us somewhere. I think that shows a lot of, and I thank you for that.
I agree with that.
I would like to read a part of our code to city council authority and responsibility. It's like the fourth sentence down, but it just says the city has adopted this code pursuant to its responsibilities to secure the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens. And in this part, also pursuant to its home rule authority. But the part that I'm really talking about is that's health, safety, and welfare of its citizens. And what I'm hearing today causes me a lot of concern about that. Specifically with, as we discussed up here, I don't need to beat the dead horse, but the frontage piece. Not only are we leaving that open, are we not providing a safe path for our citizens? We're also asking our citizens to bear a future financial responsibility. And that's going to create $500,000. That's going to burden our current citizens. And I think we have we have the ability and the need to protect them. So that's a huge one with me. I'm kind of a rule stickler. So the TSP, well, I agree with Lori on the challenges that it presents. It does state that it needs to connect. And I understand that it's a very expensive product. Both the attorney and the applicant both said that that was a huge challenge. And again, I recognize that, and I wish there was something that could be better, but I don't feel that it's should be a burden upon our current citizens of Sandy to bear your burden. The predictability piece, again, being a rule stickler, I think that offers it. Our TSP and our code is very clear on what it's required. And you recognize that in the earlier thing has been discussed. So I don't see how that's not clear and objective, and I don't see how it's not your responsibility. So those are the big things I have to say. I think as far as the connections and stuff, those are going to fall upon us. That's kind of our deal to deal with. I've recommended knock Jordan for truck signs and truck things, right? There's ways that we can mitigate that, and that falls upon us. But the connection and the financial burden and our rules that are there, I think is very predictable for you.
Any further comment? Or, well, we'll see if he wants to.
He has his hand up.
He did. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Don.
I'll make it shorter this time. I apologize for the long-windedness last time. Great comments. I agree with most. I just want to summarize 4 major points. The first, just to make clear that this for all of us, this is an independent decision on this application. And even though there were previous applications, the decision we're making is based off this one. Second point, been stated many times, but I just want to make concurrences. We can't undermine our TSP. I mean, if we were to overturn this decision, the TSP, we would have fundamentally changed the TSP and done it in a way that is not appropriate and question even allowed. I do want to echo, and I think it was stated in the last time that we heard about the importance of signal lights there. I think we all agree with that, but that's a topic for another forum. The number 2 or 3, I'm okay with the parks, as some have mentioned, to have that be disconnected, provided that there's some thoughtfulness to how, and I'm sure there are ways to integrate those sort of spaces. I will say, as we move into the frontage area, that I found it odd that the park dedication abuts the frontage, and yet no frontage improvement. That seems like kind of odd, but so yeah, frontage improvements required. 4, the applicant suggested in the argument that they brought forth one option that was denied, they brought forth the second, and this is the third. The implication being that's the only options that exist. I reject that. I think there are many aspects of each of these proposals that result in many differences. And as for the cost associated with moving forward, part of the purpose in working with staff is to understand how to apply the code and to get that clear, consistent direction, which it feels like they've been given. But when a developer chooses to push or test or to disagree with and to test, well, that's expensive, and you take some risk, and that's what's happening. The last point, really want to talk about the subjective value laden analysis. Obviously, I don't think that what we're talking about is anything but clear and objective. Granted that even in clear and objective, one could always become more objective, I suppose, just as the attempt to try to get away from subjectiveness is almost impossible in some areas, because even in the applicant's letter, talks about parkland, and the words come up, well, we think this use of parkland is superior to the other. Well, that's a very subjective statement, and it's just life. We have to make them sometimes. But nonetheless, from a code perspective, it feels like it's been consistent, feels like it's been clear, objective. There's been notes that, well, we're changing our code. Well, of course we are. We will always change our code. It's continuous improvement. We will always be looking for opportunities to improve it, to make it clearer, and adapt to the changing world around us, whether it's the legal environment or just the needs of electrified cars, and so that's it.
Thanks, Don. All right, further discussion, or is there a motion? Or yeah.
Let's see. We should have figured it out here. I'm just going to go ahead and move. I don't remember the name of I move that we deny the applicant's proposal. Got it? I move that City Council deny the Deer Meadows subdivision for the reasons outlined in the staff report.
Is there a second? There's a motion by Counselor Exner and a motion by Counselor Hokinson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you, everybody. Moving on in our agenda for tonight, under new business, we have another public hearing. We'll do a quick recess for 5 minutes before I open the public hearing. Open our Sandy City Council meeting. And I'm going to open this public hearing, State Resolution 2022-05 at 9 p.m. here on April 18th. I will call for the staff report. That is you, Jenny. Hello, welcome.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Well, the decision to be made tonight is whether to adopt findings for a modified CMGC or contract or construction manager, general contractor procurement method for the rehabilitation of wastewater collection system basins number 6 and number 7. Some context. This resolution adopts findings to support a modified CMGC procurement method for the wastewater collection system rehabilitation project basins number 6 and 7, and authorizes staff to solicit proposals for these services. This project is a continuation of the project we've recently completed using this method for basins number 2 and number 8. And this current project will rehabilitate approximately 16,000 lineal feet of sanitary sewer main lines, 200 sewer laterals, and 100 manholes. All the work will take place in Basin 6 and 7, which had the next highest infiltration and inflow rates after Basins 2 and 8, as identified in the facility plan. Sort of key considerations, there was a technical memorandum prepared by Leeway, which outlined different options for procurement methods for the city. The nature of this work lends itself to this modified CMGC contracting method. Kind of the key considerations are it really streamlines and minimizes the design, which saves us money, and it also expedites the schedule. We've successfully used this method before, and by adopting this method and these findings, it will allow us to start work on construction this summer. Going other routes would have another delay of 6 months. And doing this work, sealing our collection system is really key in minimizing the peak flows that are difficult for our plant to manage. The city anticipates competitive interest among contractors for this work. There are at least 5 that will be invited to bid and submit proposals. And the council will have the opportunity to review the proposals and award a contract for the work once the preliminary design and evaluation are completed and the owner and the contractor negotiate a guaranteed maximum price. So staff's recommendation is to approve resolution 2022-05, adopting findings for the construction manager, general contractor procurement, and authorizing staff to solicit proposals for the wastewater collection system rehabilitation project basin 6 and 7.
Right, thank you. Is there any questions for Jenny before I move forward to public testimony? All right, public testimony. Please try to avoid repetition if someone else has already expressed the same thoughts. It is sufficient to state that you agree with the statements of a previous speaker, even if that's all you say. For those joining us in person this evening, please raise your hand to indicate if you would like to speak and wait to be recognized. If you're participating online, click the raised hand button and wait to be recognized. If you're participating via telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand and wait to be recognized. I will call on each person when it is their turn to speak. Each participant will receive up to 3 minutes to testify. Jeff will let you know when you have 20 seconds remaining. Our council rules do require each person to state their name and address for the record. I am now calling on any testimony on the proposal. Another reminder, you'll have 3 minutes.
And Mayor, I do not see any raised hands.
All right, Jenny, would you like to give us a staff recap and recommendation?
Sorry, was it for that?
I think maybe just.
Our recommendation is to approve resolution adopting findings for CMGC procurement and authorizing staff to solicit proposals for the wastewater collection system rehabilitation project Basins number 6 and number 7. As far as budgetary impacts, the project will be funded by the American Rescue Plan funding.
All right, I will now call for a motion to close the public hearing. I make the motion to close the public hearing. There a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Counselor Sheldon, a second by Counselor Petzold to close the public hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nays? Yep, I see it, Don. Great. Motion carries. I'm calling for any discussion or a motion.
Any discussion? Because I'll make a motion.
Go.
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 2022-05, adopting findings for construction manager, general contractor procurement, and authorizing staff to solicit proposals for the 2021 wastewater collection system rehabilitation project in Basins number 6 and number 7.
Is there a second? Second.
I'll
There's
second.
a motion by Counselor Smallwood, Counselor Sheldon beat excellent again.
I need more copies. I need more
He's
copies.
just killing it tonight. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, motion carries. All right, thank you, Jenny. I think you're gonna have to stick around though. Next item under new business owners representation, representative wastewater program support contract amendment number 2.
Thank you. So the decisions to be made on this staff report is whether to authorize the city manager to sign a contract amendment with Leeway Engineering Solutions for wastewater operations support services. So for some background and context, in March of 21, City Council authorized the city manager to negotiate a scope of services with Leeway Engineering Solutions for Phase 1A for the Clean Water Program Owners Representation Services. And this contract was amended in January of 2022 to extend the contract term and scope. And the city is now requesting an amendment to the contract for wastewater operations support services. For several years now, the wastewater treatment plant has had trouble and has had violations of their NPDES permit for discharge to Tickle Creek. We have several projects underway to mitigate and improve this condition. However, the operation of the treatment plant is really key to the city's ability to continue to meet the NPDES permit compliance, which is under pretty tight scrutiny by the Department of Environmental Quality. While we are scheduled to complete a very important project by the end of this year, improving some bottlenecks at the treatment plant, much continues to be done in terms of operations, in terms of SOPs, as well as in terms of managing and replacing equipment that is in poor condition. So this proposal, I asked Leeway Engineering Solutions to get a proposal from Water Dude Solutions. Mark Walter is very eminent in this industry, used many different clients, large and small. And he's an operator, and there's several key points I've asked for assistance with here. The first is a facility conditions review. This will include observation of condition, useful remaining life, and criticality of assets and systems. System hierarchy will be evaluated with condition and criticality to develop a prioritized improvement schedule. And this is very important. We had another pump for our solid system go out today, and it's imperative that the treatment plant perform without any permit violations, especially this coming fall. And so this will help us get organized, make sure we have the spare parts. I'm sorry. And put together a recommended plan of continued smaller improvements and replacements. They're also going to help with our contract operations program review. They're going to review the current program, the current contract. They're going to help write standard operating procedures, recommending training programs, and there's a whole host of different things. Process control strategies, sampling procedures, biosolids processing and disposal, stress testing, and root cause analysis on upset conditions which have caused these permit violations, because some of the permit violations have been some operator error. And another important consideration for us as we grow is a staffing evaluation, a review of our current contract that we have with Veolia, as well as operation, maintenance, and management. It'll look at calculation of recommended staffing, utilizing some industry standard guidance. They're also going to help lay out whether we should consider bringing operations and maintenance staff in-house, and the advantages and disadvantages of doing that as we potentially grow to having 4 different treatment plants at the city of Sandy. The requested amendment for the wastewater operations support is $152,681. There is a considerable piece of contingency in there for different tasks that may come up. Another consideration for me is Mike Green, who is the lead of Veolia, has been helping out in Sandy while also running Wilsonville, and he's scheduled to retire in December. And so having this additional oversight to make sure we get organized, the SOPs are in place, is going to go a long way to make sure we have a smooth condition and move into just better, more efficient operations. And so the recommendation is to authorize the city manager to sign an agreement with Leeway Engineering Solutions for Amendment 2. And the proposed amendment is proposed to be funded by the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, for the city's wastewater improvements project.
Discussion, questions?
No motion just yet, but I'm in favor of this. I think this is the right thing to do. Jenny, you probably got so much on your plate right now that this has got to be some kind of connection for the on-site work. I have some concerns, and not that they overwhelm my thoughts about making this thing go forward. First off, the changing in personnel in our contractors has been, and our staff, has been one of those things that has made it very concerning for me that we have these things that are connected and that they are continued for. So things that we know how to operate our plant, things that we know that cause problems. If we change that, those kinds of people, it's going to be an issue, and it's going to mean we're going to have some more of those license impacts that nobody likes to see. So on one side, Leeway, I like Rob, he does a pretty good job. He has a struggle with communication, and there have been some times when he's not listened very well. So I would put that into your thought processes, that we need to make sure that there's good communication between the city and this contractor now. Like, I looked up the water dude, right, the name?
That's right.
He recommended. So I think that's a good thing, but we got this Green now that's leaving. We've had a couple others that have left in the past. I am concerned about consistency. I think this is the right thing to do. I think that we should be doing this, but with those caveats that we need to be careful that we don't lose that communication system and that they listen to us when we say we want this thing done in the right way. That's it for me.
Okay. Discussion, questions?
I have just one question. Jordan, so is this the tranche 2 money?
No.
No,
This is a
no.
14.7.
Right.
Thank you.
Oh,
14%, yeah.
Okay, I thought it said ARPA money.
It is.
Oh,
Yeah, they're giving us ARPA from all these different
okay,
deals,
got
but
it,
yeah.
got it, okay. 14, okay, got it. Thank you.
I think it's great, and we can't, the human supply chain is our worst nightmare, and good for this guy that's retiring. I wish I could be retiring right now. I have a few more years under my belt, but that, I don't want to be here talking about this when I retire. So I move to authorize the city manager to sign amendment number 2 with Leeway Engineering Solution for additional wastewater operations support services in the amount of $152,681.
I'll second.
Motion by Counselor Petzold, a second by Counselor Exner. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nays. Motion carries. Don't worry, I see that thumb up every time, Don. All right, moving forward. Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate it.
Good job.
Thank you.
Moving forward under new business to the audit of the corrective plan of action.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you well know, we finally wrapped up our fiscal year 2021 audit just a few weeks ago. It was a long stretch with new auditors on board, but it was a successful audit overall. Unfortunately, during that audit, they did find one misrecorded journal entry that rose to the level of a material weakness in internal controls. And so as a result of that, the state of Oregon requires a corrective plan of action to be submitted with our annual audit. And so I'm here tonight to just present the very brief plan of action, which essentially states that we will get additional eyes on atypical journal entries. For example, this specific entry was related to our full faith and credit bond issuance, which happens every 5 or so years. So not something that's very frequent. Moving forward, when we have situations like this, I'll reach out to my counterparts to ensure that the entries are reported correctly and we'll get it resolved.
You mean you're a human?
I'm a human, I know.
That's it. That's one, right?
That's one of the 404 journal entries I made last fiscal year was done incorrectly. So it's a minor inconvenience. It was easily correctable and easy to move forward.
Thank you, Tyler. You presented it. We don't have to vote on it. though,
We
do
do, yeah, sorry, I didn't make that.
there's a
The
motion.
state of Oregon does require that there is formal action taken on the corrective plan of action. So just a simple motion to approve resolution 2022-04 will suffice.
Okay, I move to adopt resolution 2022-04, a resolution adopting an audit corrective plan of action for fiscal year 2021.
For a second.
Sure, I'll second.
All right, there's a motion by Counselor Walker, a second by Counselor Exner. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nays. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler. Appreciate it. All right, Jordan, spotlight's on you. Report for the city manager.
Been quiet tonight, so
All right.
You have been like crickets.
just a couple comments on the audit. I want to thank Tyler and Carrie. So we had a new auditor this year, so that is really the reason for the delay in actually completing the audit. We had the late notice from our previous auditor. We had to go out for an RFP. We only had one response, and then bringing a new auditor online does take time and throw in COVID disruptions and all that. So it's a lot of work for a small team. And for Tyler, asking him to do a lot more these days with complicated financings and fundings and things like that. And so just wanted to express my appreciation for Tyler taking care of all that. Also appreciation to staff for our incredibly late season snow. I think I had the previous weekend update was we might get a trace of snow, and then boy, I was eating those words on Monday. But thanks to the public works crews for giving another shot and getting out there in April. And hopefully that's it. I don't know. I mean, we all love snow, but I'm ready for the sun. You saw the listening session on homelessness is now scheduled for April 28th. Thanks to Councilors Smallwood and Sheldon for helping getting that agenda out. And so we'll look forward to seeing everybody on the 28th at the library. We thought that would be a better venue for a listening session with community partners there. And we do have the virtual capabilities at the library now. That works pretty well. On police staffing, I think you saw our note about Sergeant Bickle has officially moved now to Florida. And Garrett Thornton has been promoted to sergeant, so there'll be swearing ins coming up for the mayor on that promotion. Scott Jones has accepted an offer as a patrol officer, which means we have an interagency hire going on because Scott is our systems administrator currently, who does a fabulous job in that position right now. So we are filling that position for a new systems administrator that's posted and out
The
now.
first time in city history, the police raided Sandy for their next officer.
I think about this.
Yeah,
Expect to
both
see
both
those
departments
pretty-
need staff, so
Yeah, right.
it's kind of a tug of war with both departments.
Yeah.
He did
Those
a lot.
laptops better work.
I sent a note about the upcoming agendas in May that are pretty heavy. So we'll go through a busy time here with a couple busy meetings. One of the items we'll be talking about water. We talk a lot about wastewater. We've talked some about water. We'll be talking more about water. And so Jenny and I will be reaching out about scheduling briefings with counselors, maybe in small groups, to kind of catch up on where we're at, where we're going, and talk more about the water supply project. We also wanted to reach out to the mayor about a water oversight committee like we do with the wastewater. That's been extremely helpful for us. And so we'll be looking to establish one of those oversight committees for the water project as we move forward. And then finally, Sandy Speaks has over 100 comments on the comp plan so far, which is fantastic. Actually, survey responses, yeah, on the comp plan. And I actually went in there today to take a peek, and the comments are great. So seeing a lot of engagement. Spread the word if you can. Jump in there if you want and participate. But happy to see that tool being used and rolling. So thanks.
Thanks, Troy. Carl.
Don.
Don. Sorry. Yeah, Don, you're up.
Yeah, I've talked a lot, but I just want to say thanks for letting me do this from here. Number two, just shout out to Jenny on really trying to take over the asset management side of aging infrastructure. Having worked with many companies over the years in asset management, these things that we approved tonight and the things she's doing, these are the right things to get us on a good footing. And it's not a quick change. One contract is step one. It's not the final product. So this is a long path. But anyway, good job, Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Carl.
My turn? Okay. I want to add my thank you to Jenny, and she's done a spectacular job with all the different pieces and stuff and taken over so much so quickly from Mike. I still see Mike's footprints and fingerprints over all kinds of things. I know it's really difficult to take on somebody who's had so much impact on our city. So thank you. And to Rochelle, I don't know if she's around or not, listening in. If she is, really am pleased with the recent hire of the community center manager, John Wallace. I understand, Mayor, that he's had, part of his background is dealing with difficult high school kids. So I thought maybe that would be really good.
You thought maybe he'd deal with me in the
That's
past?
what I was thinking of, the 12 years old and the city and all that kind of stuff. So becomes well qualified, I think, for all this stuff that we're going on here. So I did meet with him. Really pleased to see that our senior center is starting to get those activities up and running for the seniors. It's just really crucial to see those folks. They're the ones that are the most impacted. There's a lot of fear out there with people that have age concerning problems and health issues and such. And mentally, they need to get some sort of activities and the things that they used to do. So there's already a full plate of activities headed out for the senior part of the community center. So really very pleased with that. With that, Jeff, get a couple pictures for me. A couple of neat things that happened. Maybe neat things. I'm not sure if that's totally true. But anyway, I had a couple of pictures that I took over the last week or so. Are they going to be up there yet?
Yes, sir.
I caught you by surprise, I take it. Okay.
Snow all over these pictures.
No snow at all. Actually, none whatsoever.
There we go.
If you can see that or not. That particular one is on the corner of Scales and Proctor. It's actually across the street from my window. I can look right at that every single day. And I have seen a whole variety of skateboarders, mothers, gentlemen with walkers, try to negotiate this thing. And skateboarders in particular have a problem with, or maybe that's their goal, is to hit those barricades. You can notice there's some misaligned and there's a knockdown A-frame there. How long is ODOT going to keep that in a diverted condition like that? That's been there most of the winter. And it doesn't look like it's got any future for changes. Surely ODOT can find a way to straighten that out. Is there knowledge about when that's going to get fixed? And
They still have more to go. They're not done. There's a few more ramps.
can they finish the ones that they have put into this? It just
Yeah.
seems like it's been there an awfully long time.
Yeah. Yeah, we can push them along or try.
Okay.
Try.
I think some of it's probably seasonality, in whatever final paving work they need to do until then.
Well, I know ODOT has a really strong background of getting things done quickly and is really fast in all their activities. So I'm sure they will fix that soon. The second picture,
Yep. I'm ready for this one.
put it up there, buddy. All right. This is an interesting, I don't think I've seen this one happen before,
That's
but.
right, Jenny. They're all public works related.
And this is public works. So now I complimented you early. Now I want to know how come this is going to get fixed soon. I think this was on
Hit by a
Strauss
car?
and Proctor. I don't know how it happened. I just had a person send that to me and say,
Looks like it got hit by a car.
it looks like I hit by a car. Yeah, either that or somebody really, really strong. That's the first time I've seen something like that with those park benches. So I'm sure, Jenny, you will get right on that, right? Faster than.
I wrote it down. I'll that's Ryan. The first picture of the ramps, where was that? Cross street? You said it was across from your office.
in Proctor, right next to my office, Windermere there. That wasn't just a little sneaky way to have advertisement, was it? Or-
For Steve Bates or what? I saw his yard sign, or for your office.
My office, I said Windermere's office is right there. So when you go looking for this particular problem, go look for the Windermere office first, so. I should be done.
No, you're good. All right, Kathleen.
I missed the library meeting this month, but they've had a really, things are really cooking there. They had the National Public Library Association Conference took place in Portland this year with 4,500 people, and 5 of the library staff were able to attend the conference for at least one day. The community room at the library is set up so that you can do hybrid meetings. And so that's an option for all of us to use in the future.
You mean like what we're doing here?
Right, yeah, with the, yeah, and thanks to the IT folks for doing that, for setting that up. So that's really helpful. The number of checkouts and library cards and all that is up quite a bit. And there's lots of kids programs, adult programs that are getting lots of interest there. So things are really looking up. As far as the what I'm excited about, but what needs to be put on the city calendar and probably marketed a little bit more is the solve cleanup coming up on April 23rd. And I'm excited about doing that for yet another year, to go pick up slimy, gross trash. One of my favorite things to do here in Sandy, but no, it just makes such a big difference of kind of before and after. You feel like you really made, you cleaned up a mess and really made Sandy shine, at least for a week or so. So I'd hope that folks can kind of come out for that and engage. We're going to try to hit some of the homeless camps that Moody's been out looking at and giving us some recommendations on where to do that. And I'm excited about the new staffing, like you said, Carl, with the at the senior community center folks. I'm hoping that as soon as they kind of get their, figure out where the bathrooms and the coat rack are, that they're able to start kind of opening up the senior center a little more often than, I think it's twice a week or something right now. So hopefully, yeah, they got a lot of different things going, but yeah, hopefully it's going to be, they're going to be able to kind of open up and increase things as well as much as the library has. But it's really great that they've got their staffing kind of building up, and they've got some great folks that they just hired. So that's all I had.
All right, great. Rich.
I want to echo what Kathleen just finished up and Carl said. I think that's awesome. We're starting to open up from COVID, and I think that's a population that absolutely needs that. So excited. Thank you for that. The second piece is as far as planning commission, they're looking for counselors. I don't know if any of you guys have taken up on the for the comp plan video. If not, I'm just going to throw a plug in there to reach out to Shelley.
I want to say that I put 5 in there just this last week. So just you know, challenge.
5 what?
Videos.
Wow. So
By Carl.
yeah.
Movie
Look
stuff.
at you.
All right. Anyways, Carl did my plug for you again. Let's see, there was something else I had on my mind and you took it from me. No, thank you for that. And I look forward to the homeless thing. So I know you talked about Lori and I, but I also recognize that you have put in a lot of work on that, Jordan, and whoever's assisting you on that side. So thank you very much.
And on that note, Sandy Police has put in a lot of time working with both the homeless population and trying to navigate a lot of that. And they're doing just an exceptional job of making contact with those individuals and are very aware of who they are. So I'm really looking forward to the listening session. And on that note, Dawn, did I see you doing a ride along with Sandy PD last week? No, it wasn't you.
Was me.
Was it you?
No, but I need.
I saw the bald head. Sorry.
Carl.
No, I'm just teasing, just teasing, just teasing. Was it you, Carl?
Yes.
Good for you. Good for you. I commend you for doing that. So I hope everybody takes advantage of doing a ride along with officers so that you can kind of get an idea of what their day looks like.
Is that bald head looking back, what do they call that? I'm not even sure I know what it is anymore, but how come a bald head seems to be the thing people watch for?
I just happened
Like
to
racial
notice it in the
profiling or
passenger seat,
skin
and I
profiling.
apologize.
It's old people profiling, Carl.
I really, you know.
The red
Yeah.
dome like gleams off.
And then, hey, lastly, I want to discuss a little bit our council rules. It's come to my attention. It's, it's great that we're meeting with new staff as they come on board, and I fully support that. I think that's important, that we get to know these individuals, but we need to make sure that we're following our own rules. So some of our rules with communicating with staff is addressing all inquiries and requests for information from staff to the city manager or city attorney. And then limiting individual contacts with city officers, employees, so not to influence staff decisions, recommendations, to interfere with their work performance or undermine their authority. Remember, we're in a position of authority, so meeting with staff over and over again is questionable, and it also limits other council members the ability to have that information. So if you're meeting with staff, that information needs to be passed out to the rest of us. So let's make sure that we're following our rules as city leadership. So that's all I got.
All right, thanks, Lori.
All right, I've got one for you, Jenny. At the end of Davis and Demarco, right there, I noticed that someone hit the end of the sidewalk, metal frame thing is bent over backwards. I didn't take a picture like Carl did, but anyways, just to let you know, I don't know if it's a hazard, but definitely someone went off the road and flattened down the end of the sidewalk metal barrier. So just curiosity, do we know what caused the power outage on Saturday? It was definitely a regional thing, and so it's a little bit bigger. And so obviously being on council, you get all the phone calls.
They were working on the substation. I noticed there were several vehicles. I don't know if it got
Yeah.
if it
I
got
assumed it was.
if it got electricity spiked somehow, or if it
There
got.
was one of the canisters right there at Cedar Ridge got blown up. Except there was somebody drove by just as it blew up.
Well, that's just a
Caused a fire.
transformer.
Anyway, is there
Very
any
busy at the
notice from
substation,
PGE
too.
or anything?
Stuff that happened there.
On the cause,
Yeah,
not that I've seen yet, but I can look into it. I think we had like 2,000 or more.
or more than that.
11,000.
Two
Oh.
poles were getting
It was wild.
That was,
replaced.
that
in
was,
front
that
of
was a
buildings.
different, that was a different issue.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, I saw that
yeah,
as well.
I would hope that PGE would inform at least the city, the community you're in, so that it can be disseminated down, because we find on their website, obviously they're hurrying to get it done, and we appreciate all that time. They don't take time to, but even after the fact, what are they doing to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Or is there things that we can encourage legislatively, saying, hey, we only have 1 feet into our grid, which I know this happens in other parts of the state. If a fire or BPA goes down, we could be down. I know some other examples from talking with people that, can we help as our city grows, making sure that that doesn't happen. Having a citywide one is more of a regional thing than just a section of it. So
That's very unusual, because we do have, I happen to know the guy who supervises the PGE facility here, and he says there is 2 feeds into the city, one from Gresham and one from Bluff. It just happens that Bluff is the major one, and when it goes out, like it did, it throws the other one.
Yeah. So
For the fugly, and they really blew.
anyways, just I think good communications with our main power source for our, we should be in, an annually, conversation or whatever, because I know it's stifled businesses and construction in places where they weren't able to get out here just to do normal work. Just where are we at compared to, how do we compare to the Happy Valleys or the Beavertons in the past where,
Hey, Jeremy, we met with the president of PGE within the last year. So just remember that.
okay, well, it's been a while. I lose track during COVID.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, a year, 2 years. But anyways, just something to curious about as citizens are asking here. Let's see, the post office. I had to go to the Esticated post office down there to get passport pictures and sign. And it was one of the things when I first got on council, our mayor used to be a postal carrier in Gresham there. And she tried to get our post office here, bigger, like it was too small for the size of the community we're at. And that's 16 years, it's been a long time. Well, in communication with them, someone that's worked up here mentioned that it became, it's a fire hazard. There's so much in there that because they can't put anything in there. They're just, it's an actual hazard to that. So I don't know. And it's not the right size for our community. I mean, it just isn't. And so prodding along the US Postal Service may sound like it's working with ODOT or something, but I think it's worth checking into because, that's the life and blood of our community still, and we need it. And it's just, you go to the Esticated one, it's like 5 times the size of Sandy's, and it's bigger than Boring. So anyway, just to give you a perspective of what has not been invested in our community in that aspect. And then I saw this online. It's a meme. I didn't create it, but I thought it was the funniest thing. We have a really big supply chain issue. We ordered that snow in January and it finally showed up in April. So I know it wasn't me that said that. Whoever did, I give you credit, whoever that was. But, I think I just have to chuckle because it's just where we live right now.
Good. Just quick report on for me. Just when's our Sandy Mountain Festival? They're working hard. That committee just charging towards July, which is really exciting. Congratulations to our police department. We lose somebody, we replace somebody, and we continue to do a tremendous job on staffing and leadership there. Just really appreciate it. And then just something on housing, there's a lot of discussions on a lot of variety of ways happens on housing. This really is separate from the application here tonight. I would just say, we need to open our eyes a little bit and go on to Zillow and maybe call around as if you're looking for an apartment, and see if you could find yourself into an apartment or into a starter home, family home, or even to your second or third home, in this community right now. And again, this is totally separate from our decision earlier tonight, but to say it's been a long time since, Sandy City Council's approved a your housing application. And obviously, a lot of those go through at the staff level and don't make it up to us and through planning, and that's great. But not every housing application is equal to the next, right? There's lots that you shouldn't do and lots that you should do, but housing's needed, housing is needed. And there's good housing and bad housing, but it's just something like, let's not be anti-housing. There's some severe ramifications to that. So anyways, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. And I'll adjourn our meeting.